Oi, oi, it's your boy. No, I'm kidding. Hopefully Jack Slack doesn't slay me for that one. But it's Michael, it's a light kick, and yeah, I'm solo dolo on this one today. Lots of things are going on with the crew. Lots of things are changing with coronavirus, obviously, kind of sort of reaching a bit of a lull, and hopefully an end. The boys are getting back into the flow of things, and schedules have been tough. Not to mention, I had a fight, which we'll get into, last week. And so we have been having trouble putting out consistent content, but we're figuring it out, and you'll get consistent content, hopefully, maybe, but more probably, likely, in the coming weeks. In the meantime, I'm going to be here talking about everything that happened in the world of MMA. We're going to talk the obvious surprising result of the Pitbull McKee card in Bellator. We're going to talk. Excuse me there. We're on all that. We're obviously also going to talk about the Uriah Hall, Sean Strickland card. Fun little card for a card that was, I'm not going to lie, uneventful on paper and looked like a pile of flaming hot garbage on paper, but in practice it was a pretty good card. So yeah, we're going to talk about all of that, but first, the news, which means transition.
Let's get into the news and views of the week.
In terms of the news, obviously the big one that we didn't get to, but I know a lot of people want our thoughts on, was Conor McGregor's tweet about Khabib Nurmagomedov's father. So if you haven't seen it, which I'm pretty sure everyone has, after Dustin Poirier's win over Conor McGregor a couple weeks back, Khabib sent out a tweet that read that he was happy for Dustin and that good always overcomes evil. Obviously, evil referring to Conor McGregor, and Conor McGregor put out a tweet that said, "So COVID good and father evil," which is in reference to Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, the late Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, who died from coronavirus, or complications to coronavirus. I believe last year. It could have been early this year. No, it was late last year. It was late last year. So yeah, it was. Let me preface by saying that I don't think it's right to call someone evil, pure evil. They are, no matter how shitty of a person they are, but it pales in comparison to bringing up somebody's dead dad, for sure. That was not okay, obviously, and Conor McGregor has just proven time and time again that he is not really a good person. That's just the best way to put it. He's not a good guy. Khabib also said a tweet, not a tweet, but in an interview, and I'm paraphrasing here, with Brad Okamoto, that money doesn't change you. It reveals who you are on the inside when not given any restrictions. And it seems like Conor McGregor, when not given any restrictions, is liable to do a bunch of garbage things. Whether it's punch an old man in a bar, or throw a dolly at a bus full of fighters, or talk about someone's religion and family, threaten Dustin Poirier's kid, things like that. And this is just kind of another example. But on the other hand, clearly Conor McGregor is suffering from something, mentally, and we don't know what kind of altered state he's in. And once he gets out of it, because I am confident that Conor McGregor would get out of that mental state, you don't know the kind of person he would be in that instance either. Yes, money changes people, but your mental state can also change you for the worse as well, in terms of how you treat other people. that doesn't mean to excuse Conor McGregor in any way, and that's not what I'm saying. But my point being that we're starting to, but we still don't understand kind of what mental health does. And hopefully, Conor McGregor gets the help that he clearly needs and comes back even stronger. Next on the news, the name Max Roskopf. For anyone who doesn't remember, Max Roskopf was a guy that during the coronavirus, the UFC called up and he took on Austin Hubbard. Now, obviously, he had a record of, at the time, 4-0. A bit low for the UFC, but it's the coronavirus. It was in the middle of huge travel restrictions. So what are you going to do, right? Well, Max Roskopf faced off against Austin Hubbard, which is a tough out in the UFC. And not only did Max Roskopf lose, but unfortunately he retired on his stool in the second round. And when you look at the fight and you look at the interviews post-fight for Max Roskopf, Roskopf admitted as much that he didn't retire on his stool because of an injury. He didn't retire on his stool because of any sort of issues, but he retired on his stool because he didn't have it. That's what he said. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he said. When you look, that's what it appeared to be. And as a result, he was kind of the talk of the MMA town. And, not the debut in the UFC he wanted, but unfortunately that was the case. And he was subsequently cut by the UFC. Well, the reason why Max Roskopf comes to mind, and I thought this was pretty cool and I thought I'd share it with people, is that he recently made his comeback on Sunday on Cage Warriors. And brother got a win. Brother got a very good win against a very tough guy in Jeff Creighton, winning by ground and pound in the first round. I thought it was cool. And Creighton was 4-1 up until this point as well. And unfortunately came up a little wanting against Max Roskopf, losing in the first round by ground and pound. But yeah, I thought this was cool. I thought this was a good way for him to get back on the horse, and it shows a level of perseverance that a lot of people honestly thought he didn't have. But he showed that he does have it, and hopefully he keeps on going. I would love to see Max Roskopf keep going. It seems like with Roskopf, he is a bit of a fast starter. If I have to be technical with it, he seems like a bit of a fast starter. A lot of his wins tend to be first round stoppages, whether it's by submission or knockout. It seems to be by first round stoppage, and it seems like he kind of gets after guys really quick. And there's nothing wrong with that. One of the biggest stars in the sport's history, Conor McGregor, is labeled a fast starter as well. So, yeah. Anyway, I thought it was cool, and I thought it was a cool little story to share. So, Max Roskopf, congrats to him, and hopefully he keeps on going if he's going to decide to keep going. And if not, that's cool too. Let me also just say that I think you can also say in the same breath that it's okay to retire on your stool if you don't think you're safe, and don't listen to keyboard warriors. I think it's fine if you say, I don't have it. But at the same time, in the same breath, I think you can also say that you do display a level of toughness that people can appreciate if you're beaten and broken. Well, not necessarily broken, but you're beaten and bloodied, but not broken. And you get up for the third or the fourth or the fifth, and you fight through, right? I think you could say both are acceptable. I think you could say both in the same breath are acceptable. So, yeah. Moving on, there was one last piece of news, and that was Khabib Nurmagomedov, in his coaching career, seems to be just as good of a coach, if not better, than he was as a fighter. As his crew went 3-0 in the Bellator card, and we'll get to that card, specifically the main event, that card. His crew went 3-0. Usman Nurmagomedov, I believe, was also his cousin. I believe there was another gentleman who had a. Well, I don't believe. I know there was another gentleman. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he knocked out a dude really, really horribly to the point where Khabib actually had to take care. Well, didn't have to, but found it. I guess the word is was compelled to try to help out that gentleman, and actually was going to call. I don't know if he actually followed through with it, but called or was going to call the family of that gentleman. So yeah, he had a good night at Bellator and has moved into 8-0 for the year. In fact, I believe his only loss as a coach was in 2020. As Zabira Tukhugov lost to, I believe it was Hakeem. Yeah, it was Mean Hakeem Dawodu, in 2020. So, not an easy fight too against Mean Hakeem. Mean Hakeem is legit. Great Canadian prospect that we have here. I believe out of Alberta. So, yeah. So I think Khabib Nurmagomedov deserves some flowers there. He's definitely imparting that wisdom and that knowledge onto the boys over at AKA and the Dagestani crew. And you see it a lot too in the vlogs and I Am the Bay. He seems to have this charismatic and commanding presence. And it's not just with the Dagestani guys. You see it a lot with the American guys too. He just commands respect in a room. When Khabib is speaking, when Khabib is doing his thing, he commands respect in a room. And I think those are qualities you need as a coach. You see it in Mike Thomas Brown a lot too as well, for ATT. When he speaks, these guys listen. And it's the same with Khabib. So, yeah. All right. With all of that out of the way, let's now get into the fights that were with the fight recaps. And that means Trend.
Ding, ding.
Position. Okay, so I find it apt to talk about the UFC card first and the Bellator card second. We'll obviously have timestamps like we always do, letting you know when the Bellator card will be talking about. When we'll be talking about the Bellator card and when we'll be talking about the UFC card. So, yeah. Okay, now with Uriah Hall versus Sean Strickland, I think if I had to put this in a nutshell, it was a case of one guy drowning another guy in pressure and activity, and one guy just not being able to get out of second gear because of it. I think there's something to be said for, see, a lot of people talk about skills and technique and angles and finding different intricate ways, and martial arts is about deception. But there's something to be said for just a straight up honest style of, I'm going to punch a lot, I'm going to kick a lot, and I'm going to be as active as humanly possible. And Sean Strickland was basically that. Set a whole bunch of records, by the way. Let me just pull up some of the records he set for in terms of activity, by the way. So Sean Strickland, I believe, has the record for most strikes attempted, most strikes landed to the head, and most distance strikes landed. Which, if that doesn't scream domination, I don't know what does. It was it was a very interesting performance by Sean Strickland. It was interesting because here's the thing with Sean Strickland. I remember talking to a gentleman that I thought Sean Strickland was. I said mirage. And what I meant by that was, that's not necessarily that he's a bad fighter. It's not necessarily that he's an awful fighter. But when you take a look at his wins up until this point, and you take a look at just strength of schedule, you'd be remiss to say it was a tough strength of schedule. Like, you look at Sean Strickland, and unfortunately, it wasn't exactly the most toughest schedule. But, hey, the man did his thing in this fight. He, again, landed 186 strikes, significant strikes, which is a new UFC record at middleweight. I believe he had 486 strikes attempted, or some insane number like that, which is, again, a UFC record. 169 strikes from distance, which is a UFC record, and 173 strikes, 173 strikes to the head, which is a UFC record. So, again, the man did his thing out there, and it was just a simple matter of activity, like that. Again, UFC records, and I think when you're facing a guy like Uriah Hall, that's kind of the book, right? You want to be as active as humanly possible. Uriah Hall tends to struggle against guys who put up a good output, whether it's grappling or striking. And it's not because he has bad cardio. Uriah Hall's a durable guy and a good cardio guy. It's just, for whatever reason, Uriah Hall likes space, and he likes operating on a methodical level. And that's fine if you know, like, if you have ways to operate that methodical level. And because Uriah Hall has kind of a karate style, and karate as well as taekwondo, to my knowledge, has kind of went away from the front kick, just due to the fact that the way karate and taekwondo point sparring is done, front kicks get you in trouble a lot, so it doesn't really get emphasized. But because of that, he can't. Besides the jab, Uriah Hall doesn't really have any distance weapons to really. And this is where we get into the technical aspect of stuff. But he doesn't really have a lot of distance weapons to really stop a guy from really inputting a lot of activity. And when you have a good jab like Uriah Hall, do you really need it when you're facing guys who are not necessarily the best? But when you're facing the best, it would be nice to get things like an oblique kick, a front kick, even throwing out the side kick every once in a while, or whooping out that knee up as a chamber would really help. So I think for Uriah Hall, I think it's time for him to really develop some distance management weapons, particularly with the feet. Because he can defend a takedown. He can, he has a good jab. I think his problem is just rounding out that skill set and going to the body with some of those kicking distance weapons. So Uriah Hall has the potential. I think Uriah Hall, although 37, can still grow into something in the last stages of his career, because he's still such a great athlete. And he believes he can still grow, so why not? But great win for Sean Strickland. A lot of activity, a lot of pressure, and a psychopath. This man talks a lot of trash. And yeah, the other aspect of this fight too that was interesting was Sean Strickland's comments towards the end. This isn't the first time someone said, "I would like to kill somebody in the ring." Deontay Wilder has said it in the world of boxing. BJ Penn said it in his lead-up to, I believe, the George St. Pierre fight. I believe so. No, it was the Matt Hughes fight. Matt Hughes, you're dead. So, BJ Penn, underrated trash talker, by the way. But the guys have said this before. I think the problem that Sean Strickland had was, one, he was so vivid with his imagery about it. Like, he was like, I would definitely love to kill somebody in the ring, in the cage. Which is like, we still have to market this to the mainstream. And people aren't okay with watching murder, Sean. But I think the other thing is, it does show a level and lack of disrespect that I think, unfortunately, look, Khabib said best. It is a respect sport. And you got to remember that although it is legalized fighting, it is still a sport, and you still have to be a sportsman. And I think when you do that, it blurs the line between sports and competition to I don't like you, let's fight. Even when you don't like your fellow competitor, there is a line that you honestly shouldn't cross. And I think when you cross into murder, it gets a little weird and awkward to the human consciousness. And those other examples I brought up where it's been done before, yeah, like people get a little skittish and weird about it because it's like, this is still supposed to be competition. Why are we allowing this to take place if you are willing to kill people? Like, I get it. It's when you're in a fight, and I've done this too, you have to turn your mind on to not care about kind of the consequences, but you're not supposed to, like, what's the word? At the end of the day, it's still supposed to be a respectful competition. And I think that's what got people weird about this comment. And I honestly don't think Sean Strickland actually wants to kill somebody. Like, I really don't. Like, I think he was just saying it for laughs and for effect. He thought it would be cool, and he's hyped up on adrenaline. And people have said things they don't mean when those things happen. So, yeah. All that to say that I think Mr. Strickland here got in a little bit more than he can chew. On to the rest of the card. I'll be honest. Besides the Barberino fight, I don't really want to talk about much, but there were lessons I think you could take away from every fight, even though they were very quick. For example, Cheyenne Bays, not Bays, Bays versus Gloria DePaula. Okay, in this fight, I actually thought Cheyenne came out really aggressive and good, which was a far cry from her last fight against Montserrat Ruiz, where she got held on a takedown and basically held down in a weird version of Scarfold for 3 rounds. Which kind of says a lot. But I think she actually did come out, like, you could clearly tell that striking is her strong suit, and she came out pretty good and aggressive. And to Gloria's credit, she used good angles and moved, but then she slipped. She fell and slipped, and then on trying to get back up, she forgot the cardinal rule of when you get back up. Yes, it was a technical stand-up, but you have to create distance before you get up because, yeah, things like what happened to her will happen. And what happened is, on the way up from her technical stand-up, DePaula caught a head kick from hell by Cheyenne Bays, which was excellent timing by Mrs. Bays or Bays. Mrs. Bays. She caught her on the way up because she didn't create distance. And I think that was a good, simple lesson that you can actually take to your martial arts class whenever you're sparring or drilling to, create distance by kicking the front leg, by understanding where your distance is. Even a nice roll into the technical stand-up will help. Like, these things matter. Now, look, you're talking to somebody who's an observer of fighting, right? By the way, this is my air conditioner box. We're going to throw that out later. But I'm not the guy to be saying this, but unfortunately, but it is a simple, nice lesson I think you could take away. And it's a short fight, so go watch it if you can. And because it's not very long, you don't have to kind of suffer through the boringness that is a 3-round affair where Baez is getting held down in Scarfold. No one will ever let her live that down. No one. On to the next fight, which is Jared Gooden versus Nicholas Stolze. Now, Stolze, I know it's Stolze. That's kind of the way the Germans like to say the Z. Götze, Stolze. If you ever watch soccer, there's a gentleman named Mario Götze who used to play for the German national team. What that has to do with fighting, no clue. But anyway, this fight. Now, again, another short fight, 1 minute and 8 seconds, round number 1. Jared Gooden comes up with the victory. And I really like this fight, for kind of the same reason I like the Cheyenne Bays fight, because it's a nice, simple lesson that you can take into sparring. Stolze had this tendency that when he threw his straight right, it was a straight right, he would kind of bring it back lazy, and not necessarily in that conventional, like he'd drop it low to like his chest or whatever, but it wasn't coming back quick enough. And what was happening was Flash Gooden was hitting him with the check right, the check left hook all the time, and what happened as a result was it would kind of pause Stolze in his movement going backwards, because he would throw that check, he would throw that straight and want to either move his head backwards, or want to kind of angle out to Gooden's blind side, and he couldn't. So Stolze, on the finishing sequence, Stolze tries to throw that throw that straight right, and then kind of angle out to the blind side, thinking he's frozen Gooden. And to his credit, he landed that straight right, but then Gooden came in with the check left, and then came in with the right straight to follow up after he got that nice initial distance, that he got the sweeper to get Stolze to freeze into his bandbox, or his range, and then hits him with the so it was more like check left, straight right. That's all she wrote. And yeah, it was a good, again, nice, good lesson you can take away to sparring, to make sure that when you throw your straight right, it's right back, or straight left because I'm a southpaw, it's right back, right? You want to right back. You don't want to kind of necessarily kind of be lackadaisical in when you're bringing right back, even if it's coming to your chin. You want it to, come right back to that chin and jaw level, or at least to a position where you're ready. There's a lot of merits in keeping your hands down for sure, which we'll get to in the next fight, by the way, because that's also another good lesson that you could take. But, make sure to be in a position that you're ready to keep your hands up, for all the amateur martial artists out there. Moving on to the next fight, which was Melsik Baghdasaryan versus Colin Anglin. And good. You know what? I actually enjoyed this card when watching it on paper. There was a lot of good finishes, and there was a lot of good fights, that you could take away. And I think this fight, another good lesson. Melsik Baghdasaryan, first of all, is so fast. Those kicks come out so fast. You can really tell that he's got that great kickboxing background because of the way the kicks come out so fast and so hard. He throws it with 100%, and you wonder how he's going to do in the higher levels when durable guys and tough guys and guys who kind of know how to deal with that speed are going to be able to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Survive or mitigate the damage that they take early. You wonder how he's going to do in MMA with that kind of style, but it's fun as hell. And those kicks come out so quick like a piston. And even the punches, too, come out so quick in that first round. But to Colin Anglin's credit, he did a really good job of either rolling with the punches and kicks, or kind of absorbing it and then getting into the clinch and doing what he wants from there. He was pretty effective in tight with the clinch. He was actually pretty effective from distance, I thought, too, landing what he landed. And, he was really good at kind of stifling Baghdasaryan's jab with kind of the long guard, a variation of it. Like, I like to call it kind of the karate stance guard, where you are side on and the hand comes up like so, right? And what you're basically doing is you're basically kind of mirroring the hand, because Baghdasaryan comes out in southpaw. So what happens is you're kind of stopping the jab from being effective, because the jab is lined up with that with your left hand or right hand. I'm in southpaw right here doing it, but Colin was more like this because he's orthodox, and you're stopping that left hand from really being effective. As a result, not only are you stopping it from being effective from the jab by stopping it outright, you're also stopping or being on the lookout for any time somebody moves their hand or moves that jab, because now you can see it better and you can, evade effectively with the lead hand. The drawback to it is if a cross or a kick comes, you already have one hand out that you can't mitigate the damage, so you're relying on this hand to be effective at all times in blocking or parrying the other hand. And this is where we get into the lesson of the day, because in the second round, Baghdasaryan throws this head kick from hell that lands flush on Colin Anglin's neck, jaw area, right here. And as a result, fight was over. And it's because Colin had his rear hand down the entire time. Well, not the entire time, but a lot of the time. And the reason why you get into this mode is because by nature and by memory, when this hand is here, the other hand follows, right? But when this hand comes out, and all of a sudden you get lazy with this hand. And it won't happen initially, especially if you kind of have it in your mind early. But after you take the first punch, the first kick, and you're on adrenaline, and you have to rely on your muscle memory, this hand starts to go down, right? Or it starts to do something. It starts to waver. And you're not necessarily ready until you get stood up. Now, if somebody hits like a mosquito, you learn your lesson right away, and then you remember, and then you're back to here. But if someone hits hard, you're not really going to get a second chance. And Colin, unfortunately, did not get that second chance, and as a result, got hit right here. So, yeah, it was, again, great lesson that you could take away from this fight. I really enjoyed a lot of these shorter fights. Not because it's like, oh, somebody got knocked out and it was just a slobber knocker, but just because even with the knockouts, lessons could be learned. Last what I kind of want to talk about before we can end it, before we can end the UFC portion of it, the Jason Witt versus Bryan Barberena fight. Now, this was an interesting fight. For those who don't know, Bryan Barberena was at one point like in or around the top 15 of the welterweight division. He was very close, if not like already there. Just kind of like I would say, if I had to put a ranking with him, he'd be number 16, number 17 area. Gave Vicente Luque a really tough fight back in the day, but he's gone through some injury issues, and so he's not as active as he would have liked in the UFC as of late. But he finally came back to face. He finally came back to face Jason Witt, and this fight again was really, really fun and interesting, specifically that third round. Now, in the first two rounds, Jason Witt did everything he was supposed to do. Either fought all the way out or all the way in on Bryan Barberena. Because Bryan Barberena is a brawler. And that's a weird way to kind of put it in this day and age, because he does have some technical aspects to him. He likes to do a lot of interesting stuff. He's pretty good at finding his way around a guard. And I think that's why he's more inclined to brawl, because he's like, he can find his way to he can find shots through a defensive guard. But yeah, like, you don't want to be in a fight like a brawl or a mid-range fight with Bryan Barberena unless you're like one of the best in the world at it. And even so, that's a bit of a tough task. So Jason Witt did what he was supposed to do and fought all the way out, or would, fight all the way in and really tie up Barberena, and was pretty effective in landing some of his takedowns. I believe it was 4 for 7 or 5 for 6. 5 for 8 if you include the third round and that takedown for a little bit. So yeah. It was interesting for that first 2 rounds. But then in the third round, Bryan Barberena was desperate. And for about 2 minutes and 45 seconds, Jason Witt was in all kinds of trouble. It started with an exchange up against the cage where Barberena, again, found a way to land through a guard. As Jason Witt put up a defensive shell, a high defensive shell, Barberena landed a right hook, left hook, right hook, straight right. No, right hook, sorry, left hook, right hook, left hook, straight right. That wobbled Barberena, and then it was just a race against time. And it was absolutely insane. There was an exchange where Jason Witt decides to open up because he's like, I can't get this guy off of me with a guard, so I'm going to try to open up, and threw a straight right, left uppercut, and then paid for it with Barberena throwing hook, cross, hook, lead hook, cross, lead hook, rear cross, lead hook, rear hook, and dropped Barberena, and then dropped Jason Witt, and then and then Jason Witt, excuse me, on his hands and knees for dear life, crawling for a takedown, gets pieced up on the ground, and God bless James Krause, because James Krause has to be one of the loudest cornermen I've ever heard in my life. Or maybe it's just because it's the nature of what happens when you're in the Apex Center, and even with the crowd, it's like 50 people. But James Krause was so loud and was imploring Jason Witt to get back on his feet and try to attempt a proper takedown. Because my guy Jason Witt was doing the baby walk, the baby crawl for a takedown. And James Krause, if he's not there, I don't think Jason Witt survives the third round. I really don't. And he lands that takedown, but then Barberena gets back up and lands another great sequence. And then there was a moment where Barberena almost gets a Kimura, because he gets the Kimura lock, gets Jason Witt to go down, but he's in side control, rolls him through, but then just loses the Kimura, and then the solace and finally the respite Jason Witt gets comes in the last 10 seconds as Barberena goes for a flying knee, gets caught with a right hand. That more than anything, the force of the punch pushes Barberena down, and then, basically he goes for a takedown, and it's 5 seconds left. What are you going to do? Fight's over, and Jason Witt gets the majority decision. Don't worry, it's not like one judge scored it for Barberena. They just scored that final round a 10-8. Which I think, it's weird. I think the 10-8 is such an arbitrary thing in MMA. Like, in boxing, it's you get knocked down, 10-8. That's it. In Muay Thai, at least in Muay Thai, like in the Muay Thai competitions in North America, actually I can't say that. I don't know how Mexico does it. But in the Muay Thai competitions in Canada and the USA, you get knocked down, 10-8. You get knocked down twice, 10-7. That's it. There's no discussion, right? In MMA, it's not like that. It doesn't work like that. So it's weird. I don't know if this should have been a 10-8, because I don't think even judges know what constitutes a 10-8 or a 10-7. I really don't. Like, and here's the thing. It's not like Jason Witt didn't do anything in that round. He did land a takedown. He was controlling the fight for half of that round. He did land some of the shots on his own, some shots as well. So it's weird to say, with that majority decision, if that should have been a 10-8 and thus a 28-28 fight instead of a 29-28 fight. But alas, Jason Witt came away with a W. Other fights before we get into the Bellator card that was on the preliminary card. Relatively small preliminary card than usual. Other fights that you might want to go check out. I particularly found the Philip Rowe versus Oscar Cossi, or whatever you say his name. I found that particularly exciting. And I particularly like the Kai Kamaka, the third versus Chavez fight. I thought that was cool too. Again, a fun little card, in my opinion. I think there was a lot of fun fights. If you're a hardcore MMA fan and you just want to see some good fights, you'll like it. Now, if you want to see some name value, this card's not for you. It was the drizzling garbage that it was when it came to name value. The main event was Sean Strickland versus Uriah Hall, for God's sakes. So, it is what it is. On to the Bellator card. I actually, see, we're now getting into a period of time where Bellator is legitimately the successor to Strikeforce. And what I mean by that is, when Strikeforce was at its best, they weren't necessarily, like, of course, now looking at it, a lot of the talent in Strikeforce ended up doing very, very well in the UFC. So, from a talent perspective, they definitely had guys. They had guys. Now, their depth was not the greatest, but their top guys were just as good, if not better, because a lot of those guys ended up being champions. But when it comes to promotion, and when it comes to name value, and when it comes to people, when it comes to fighters people want to see, I don't think Bellator, when they put their best, and the UFC when they put their best, I don't think Bellator can compete. But Bellator's been doing this thing. I don't know if it's on purpose, but it definitely seems like it. But they've been doing this thing where they put their best on in times when the UFC either cannot put their best or somehow, some way messes up in putting on their best. And you saw it in the last big card the promotion had when it was the Bellator tournament, where they kind of mapped out what they thought the UFC's card was going to be around that time, and they were like, no way they could compete. Put the Bellator card on. They tend to be very smart in the way they promote, and what this does is this. When Bellator puts on their best, and the UFC puts on even so much as their C game, Bellator has a better card. Okay? And Bellator knows this. They know this. In terms of fights people want to see, they know that when Bellator puts on their A card and the UFC puts on their C card, Bellator's A card is better or a more palatable product to MMA fans. And it's especially evident when the UFC puts on their E card or their D card. In this case, no disrespect to Sean Strickland or Uriah Hall. I think they're good fighters, but unfortunately, they don't have the name value that a Pitbull or AJ McKee or anybody with the last name Nurmagomedov has. So, what does Bellator do? They stack their card and put on their A team. And it's not even just with their the aforementioned Pitbull, McKee, or Nurmagomedov. It's fighters like Hassan Magomed Sharipov, fighters like Vanessa Porto, fighters like Brett Primus, who, again, was victim to the Habib Death Squad. So you're getting good fights, and so all that to say that I really particularly enjoyed this Bellator card. And one of the reasons why I enjoyed it is, ladies and gentlemen, we got a new champion in AJ McKee. AJ McKee has defeated one of the best featherweights in the world in the Grand Prix, has won $1 million. And this, for AJ McKee, it's only up from here, because the kid is, like, people need to keep in mind, he's 26. He's got... And he fights a style when it comes to grappling. His grappling is top-notch. It's a very aggressive grappling style where he just dives through stuff, and I find it amazing. But at the end of the day, it's still a style that, you can sustain for a large period of time. When you look at some of the guys who retired older, guys like Daniel Cormier, guys like Damian Maia, guys like Fabrizio Verdum is still fighting. Jacare is still fighting. these guys were grapplers, and grapplers tend to have a longer shelf life on the top of being successful. That's not to say that strikers can't do it. Like Anderson Silva was competitive till he was like 42, 43, and even still was able to fight until his mid 40s. Dan Henderson transitioned into a striker, to be honest with you, and he fought till his mid 40s. So it's not like strikers can't do it, but your body is like a health meter, and your body needs to be taken care of when it comes to longevity, and we tend to see that grapplers tend to stay relatively fresher in their careers, and it makes sense, right? They're taking less strikes. Grappling's more of a slower paced kind of aspect to fighting. It takes a lot, in the sense that it takes a lot more to go. So that tangent is just to say that AJ McKee, I think, can do this for a long time, and he's still improving, and he's a good enough striker that he's not necessarily going to be a fish out of water if he's on his feet for a minute, 2 minutes at a time. He can kind of sort of use his striking to service going to the ground, whether it's on his back or when he's on top. So he could do this for a long time. But let's talk about the fight and what actually happened, and the lesson that you could take away from here. I thought that it was more of a display of how good AJ McKee's striking has come along than it is in a display of his grappling. Even though he ended up sleeping Pitbull with a guillotine choke. And what I mean by this is Pitbull, despite being like 4'11", I'm kidding, is a guy who is known for his grappling. Is known for his counter striking. Why do I say grappling? But he's known for his counter striking, right? He catches guys off counters. He capitalizes off a mistake where guys overextend themselves, and then goes after that. Now, typically how Pitbull does this is he stands his ground and forces guys to make decisions by standing his ground. But in this particular fight, for whatever reason, Pitbull decided to back up. And I know he's probably going to be kicking himself and wondering why that was. But my reasons as to why I think that was because McKee threw a lot of these very subtle feints out there early to back Pitbull up and use his length. Because the thing about McKee, too, as opposed to, let's say, an Emmanuel Sanchez, for example, is that McKee's reach is very long for the division. Very long. And so as a result, he can keep you at the end of stuff. And I think Pitbull, aware of this, wanted to kind of, again, fight all the way out or all the way in. And only really capitalize when he thought he could absolutely do so. And I think that's what ultimately led to him getting backed up a bit. So what ends up happening is he's biting on feints, and McKee throws a straight right that gets Pitbull to slip his head to his left, and McKee throws this beautiful head kick off of that, getting Pitbull to basically lean into that head kick. In a weird way, it's kind of like, if I have to throw an example here, it's kind of what Rose was trying to do to Wei Li. Get the attention, well, not trying, what she did to Wei Li. Get the attention elsewhere, and then, hit her with something upstairs. And it worked, right? AJ McKee basically, what's the word I'm looking for? AJ McKee basically got poor Pitbull to have his attention go towards that straight right, and then throws a beautiful head kick there. So all of that to say that I think McKee, it was a wonderful win, a very dominant win, insanely fun. He kind of got a little too overzealous at the end. Not overzealous, not overzealous, but he got a little too celebrated a little early there with the what do you call it? The hands up, you know. But again, pumped out that straight right, you know, to get Pitbull to kind of go. What's the word I'm looking for? Slip or lean over and then hit him, and then after finished off with the guillotine after a flurry. So congratulations to finish him off with a flurry and then into the guillotine and then stopped him. Other interesting fights here. I like Matt Burnell a lot. I like Matt Burnell a lot, and they had him here against Emmanuel Sanchez. Emmanuel Sanchez, another tough loss for him. You know, got the title shot against Pitbull in the Grand Prix. Unfortunately, came off wanting, and then he fought Matt Burnell. But like the thing about Burnell is, I like him a lot. I really do. Really fun, interesting grappler. You know, and just basically did his thing here. Now we talk about the Nurmagomedov boys. The Nurmagomedov boys again. Usman Nurmagomedov, first round TKO. Him with hit his opponent Murrow with a slick knee, and then kind of finished off with some ground and pound. Mamedov wins against Brett Primus. Brett, I think with Brett, like he's got the calling card of beating Michael Chandler clean to his name, and a former Bellator lightweight champion. I think he's either 1-2 or 2-2 in his last. I could be wrong. But he again, he has a distinction of beating Michael Chandler absolutely clean. Okay, while being undefeated, by the way. So he was a good fighter. He's a good fighter and a very tough matchup for anybody. And it was a big win for Islam Mamedov. Other fights here. Now, Vanessa Porto I really like as a fighter. Hassan Magomed Sharipov came away with a W here. And the other Nurmagomedov boy here, Rabah Dananov, basically hits him with this left hook from hell that just crumples my guy Carey here and put him in a field position. And then there was some follow-up shots after. I think there was one more hammer fist after. Really scary as Mr. Carey was unresponsive to, again, the point where Khabib, I mentioned it in the beginning of the podcast, felt compelled to help him out. So, yeah, really scary scene, but on the flip side, a great win for... Excuse me there. Apologize for the wall. But a great win for Rabah Dananov. All in all, I really like the Bellator card. And, yeah, I know a lot of people really enjoyed the Bellator card, and we're looking forward to the Bellator card more than the UFC card. And, you know, again, they're not as active as the UFC, but they're very good in being strategic about when they put on a card. And it looks like the next card, they've done it again where they're very strategic, where there's not even going to be a UFC card on that week. August 13th, Mousasi is going to take on Seltzer, which I think is a very, very interesting fight and a very smart fight. And I believe on the undercard, Magomedov is fighting versus Rufian Stoltz. So you're getting a good card. You are getting a good card, and I believe Andrei Koreshkov is fighting on that card too. But don't quote me on it. I don't have the card in front of me. I believe Andrei Koreshkov is fighting and Magomedov is fighting on that card. And that's August 13th. And again, aforementioned, the UFC doesn't even have a card going on that weekend at all. They have a fight. They have a card the week before, which took a massive hit with Lewis versus Gon, as Amanda Nunes has COVID and cannot fight on that card. But all that to say that when the Bellator is being very strategic about when they put their cards on, very strategic, and as a result, I think they're really turning into a very legitimate number two. And to be honest, I think the UFC is okay with that because they're going through a lot of legal battles, on the basis of if they're a monopoly or not. So, yeah. All right, well, I know a lot of people have been dying to ask me some questions regarding what I did, as to why we had no show. And the reason as to why that is, for those who don't know, I'm an amateur mixed martial artist as well as an amateur Thai competitor. So I was out, me and Stefano were out to Montreal competing. He wasn't competing, but he was cornering me. And we took on a very tough guy in the name of Olivier Ryan, or Ryan. I can't remember how they said in the commentary booth. I don't want to disrespect the guy. Good dude. And yeah, we came away with a W. So Light Kick got a W out there. Yeah, it was fun. It was good. It was a good experience. Not gonna lie, he got me a little in the third. He had a flurry in the third, a couple good flurries in the third. But for the most part, it was the game plan being followed and leading to success, to a very, very hard-fought unanimous decision. Now, I know a lot of fans were dying to ask questions about it, because we got a lot of questions via email, and we got a lot of questions, via Instagram, whether it was my personal Instagram or the Light Kicks account. By the way, if you have a question, the lightkick1@gmail.com. So yeah. Let's see here. So first question was, did you win? Yes, I won. Okay. Second question was, what was the difference? So someone who watches, what's the difference between fighting in a cage versus fighting in a ring? Well, the biggest thing about fighting in a cage versus fighting in a ring, I think the biggest difference is the cage can either be your best friend or your worst enemy when it comes to grappling exchanges. And what I mean by that is when you can use the cage as a way to kind of hold yourself up for the time being, and kind of like fight off like underhooks and overhooks and clinches in the clinch, up against the cage or up against the fence, because you're kind of like using it to hold yourself up. But the problem comes when you face a guy like Khabib Nurmagomedov, or somebody who's really good at using the cage to kind of get you off. Like they'll use this. There's this new takedown a lot of people like to use, where they'll like kind of like bump you into the fence, and then the reverberation of it will get you off the fence just enough that they kind of like sweep your legs under because you've been relying on it. So it's almost like kind of pulling off the chair a bit. Whereas when you're using the ropes, like when you're fighting inside like a rope or like a squared circle, and you're kind of using, ropes, it's not the same. You don't really have it hold you up the same way. Because again, the ropes, they're not like hard surfaces that like have barely any give. And it's like, again, ropes. So you can't really like use it to hold yourself up. So you're basically getting like, in my opinion, a more pure form of what grappling would look like in open space, when someone goes for a takedown. But other than that, it's kind of I would say striking wise, it's hard. It's easier to cut people off inside a ring because you're getting definitive like corners, right, that people can't get out of. Versus when you're fighting up against an octagon, the octagon's corners are not the same, so you can't really cut people off. Well, you can cut people off, of course, but you can't really cut people off the same way that you would, let's say, a ring. when it comes to striking. But yeah, other than that, I think that's it. Pretty much the differences, like the big differences that are like glaring. There are like little idiosyncrasies that like honestly I don't want to get into because we are running out of time. Couple more questions. I'm gonna pick one that's easy to answer right away, and then I'm gonna pick like a harder one. Let's see here. What are good ways to, let's see this. Let me read this properly. Like the wording's a little off. What's good ways? I'm gonna try to clean it up for you. What are some good ways to get rid of your nerves when going into a fight? I would like to fight, but I'm too nervous to do so. Okay. Well, I think what helps me is speak your thing into existence. For a long time, I didn't used to speak winning into existence. I'd be like, this is a good fighter. You never know what could happen. And that's not to say I wasn't confident in my abilities, but I just wasn't speaking it into existence. And I think subconsciously that was me kind of saying, I don't think I'm gonna win. I think when you speak it into existence, let's say you are fighting, if you are fighting, I think if you're going to fight, even if it comes off as cocky or diva to you, and even if you, let's say, do end up losing, it is not eating your words to speak things in existence that you're going to win. You're going to win. You're going to win. And I think saying it over and over again, having in your mind and leaving no doubt in your mind, allows you to come into a fight, ready to do your best, ready to show your best. Other than that, I for me personally, meditation helped. I am now doing a lot of meditation, sports meditation, breathing, things like that, to just get over your nerves. I think that's super important. So my advice is just speak things into existence and find something that brings you back to focus, whether it's meditation, whether it's a hobby, whether it's like a habit. I know a guy who likes to knit. I kid you not. I know a dude who, when he's going into a competition, he's a football guy, and no, it's not Jeremy, but I know a guy who actually like sits down and knits for a couple hours because it calms him down before a big game. Like not like week 5 of like the CFL season or whatever, but like when he's going into like a big playoff game, he likes to knit for like a couple hours. He's a fidgeter too. I remember back, like I know him from back in the day in childhood, and he likes to he was one of the guys who liked to do GIMP. You remember GIMP? It was like that plastic thingy. But he's a fidgeter. But yeah, anyway, okay, next question. Was it weird fighting someone who was also a southpaw? I actually liked fighting a fellow southpaw more than I like fighting an orthodox, at least for the context of that fight, because a lot of the things we worked on were weapons that you would use in close stance. So jab, outside low kick, front teep, although there's an interesting story about the front teep, and I guess we can answer that question. It's in here too. But there's a lot of things that like you could use that you wouldn't necessarily use the same way in southpaw. Now that isn't to say that the rear kick doesn't, like the rear kick was less effective in certain ways because the high kick was always being blocked, and I kind of was like about it. But the low kick was money, and it's not usually like that for me. You'd have to kind of hit the inside of the leg when you're fighting in orthodox. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't enjoy doing it, but it's nice to get someone limping a little bit or like their movement compromised a bit because you're hitting that calf, and that the back of the knee over and over again. Whereas when you're hitting, let's say the open stance, yeah, you can hit the calf, and yeah, I do try to like hit that like inside part of the knee, and it does tend to work for me. But it takes a lot more because you're not hitting the nerve the same way, right? The nerve is the nerve of the knee and the calf kick that the nerve gets activated from when you kick. It's on like kind of like the the outer side. It's closer to the outer side of the leg, so it's harder to get there. That's the best way to explain it. And so as a result, you kind of have to like, and also because naturally the knee can just turn inward and check, you have to be creative about how you attack the leg. You have to kind of sometimes go behind the leg, sometimes go to the calf, sometimes go up high. And that's another thing. You have to really be careful about hitting just high enough that you're hitting that thigh. The thigh, but not super high that you're going to hit the nuts. You have to like hit just in that nice sweet spot. And for everyone, it's different because heights are different, stances are different, things like that. So, yeah, I pretty much enjoyed throwing that outside low kick a lot more from facing somebody else who was a southpaw as opposed to, throwing it on the inside. But yeah, like things going over the top, like the left hand I usually have, and the head kick that usually gets people like really frustrated, and the rear teep was kind of not there for me, which again is fine. What can you do? But it was like I actually liked it for that context of what we were working on for the game plan. I actually kind of enjoyed it a lot more. Okay, final question before we kind of put a lid on the show. So a lot of people really watched this fight, and I was very surprised when I got it in my personal, like a lot of the questions. So the rear teep or the teep, why didn't you? Essentially, I got a lot of questions kind of going, why didn't you go to the teep more? Or why did you save it for the third round? Or what happened? Funny story. Okay, so I guess this is story time here. No transition, don't worry about it. But funny story. What happened was when we go to I missed the rules meeting. Okay? Me and Stefano don't understand the concept of time. I'm convinced like Stefano's half black or something, because he doesn't he really does not understand the concept of time. And we were late. We were late by like I think 15 minutes, and as a result, we caught just the end of the rules meeting. And honestly, we kind of got the rules, but like I forgot them. So yeah, when we get to the rules meeting, I forgot them. So the ref was gonna give us like kind of like a rundown of what's gonna go on anyway, and due to coronavirus and the way you have to kind of maneuver when you're an amateur promotion, he was gonna tell us in the ring, literally in the ring. So I get kind of the instructions in the rings of what you can and cannot do. And here's the thing: we're in Montreal, a predominantly French-speaking province. I'm English-speaking. Listen. My French is so bad. A lot of people think because I'm Canadian, like my French is like on point. It's not like that. It is not like that at all. We learned it to like grade 9, and then it's done. Okay, we do not know French like that. So, and to his credit, he's a multilingual guy, and like in a normal conversation, he's just fine. But there is clearly a language barrier. So when he was explaining the rules, even there was a couple times where I noticed like he was kind of like missing something, right? He would say it in French, then he would say it in English, and he'd say to me, no spinning attacks in French to my opponent, who is predominantly French speaking, then would say something to me in English. Now here's the first clue I should have picked up on. He goes, no spinning attacks, right? And I was like, wait, so no spin kicks, no spin like to where, right? But he just said straight up no spinning attacks. What he meant was no spinning back fists. Weird rule, I know, but whatever. They have their rules, it is what it is. He just said no spinning back fists. So like when he corrected himself and went no spinning back fists. That's how he went, right? Then he goes no push kicks. I go, weird rule, but okay. I should have asked him, where specifically? Like push kicks to the face, whatever. It just seemed like no spinning attacks seemed like a weird, arbitrary umbrella rule to me, whereas push kicks kind of seemed pretty like specific. Okay, no push kicks. So we get to the fight, and to be honest, the fight starts, and I didn't. While a push kick is a staple, it's the rear push kick that's a staple of my game. I don't throw the lead push kick a lot, or the lead teep a lot, because I'm a southpaw. You're facing orthodox people. Naturally, they can get out of the way of it. What are you gonna do? But yeah, like, just didn't really catch my mind. But in my head, I knew it was illegal, or at least I thought. What this guy meant to say was no push kicks to the knee. So fight happens, and first 2 rounds don't really need it. You know, winning. I thought I comfortably won the first 2 rounds. 3rd round comes, and my boy Olivier is desperate. He needs a W, right? So he's going for the finish, and as a result, there was a couple flurries. Now, there were punches that hit me, there were punches that missed, but the pressure was still there. Like, he was really pressuring, and I was like, and the jab was doing its thing, but he was starting to pick up on the timing of it a little bit, and I said, boy, would it not be a good time to throw a teep right now. and I was like, wait a second, why is it that the teep is illegal? Like, why is it that the push kick is illegal? So, you know, I kind of had an element of evil a little bit and said, okay, I'm going to throw it, and if it's illegal, he's going to warn me, and I'll say, oh, sorry about it, boss, and then go from there. Through the push kick. Was super effective, by the way. So a lot of people were kind of upset that, like, I didn't go to it more. That's what, because it was super effective. Wow, I'm rambling on this one. But yeah, we throw a push kick, no warning, and that's when I realized, victim of the language barrier, he didn't mean put teeps. He meant oblique kicks and push kicks to the knee, right? And I was like, thank you, and just kept throwing them the rest of the round. And that's why the pressure kind of stopped after, because he was so worried about that push kick coming out, because for 3 times, he got hit with a push kick and it sent him all the way back to either the ropes or to, I guess, the turnbuckle. So, yeah, that was the funny story about the teep. Didn't know you could throw it. That's basically what happened. I just didn't know I could throw it. But yeah, all in all, cool trip. We went to Old Montreal, and it was a fun time. And, you know, it's always fun to get a win and then go somewhere, right? So, yeah, great time. That's for all the people who kind of asked those questions. I would have liked from, you know, other experiences, because Stefano was there too. I would have liked for it to be kind of more of a inclusive episode, but we need to get one out right away before people got worried. So, yeah, and I think that's pretty much the end of the show. Thanks for listening to me ramble on for an hour and a half or so. And until next time, you'll get a show. But let me just, I guess, threaten the children. Now, I didn't have anything prepared. But yeah, if you don't like this show and don't subscribe and don't tell your friends about it, I will come to your home and not be creative about it. I'm just gonna beat you to a pulp, and then after give you a swirly by pissing into the toilet and flushing over and over again. Yeah, that's basically it. There's no creativity about it. Just gonna do that. Now, in this crazy mixed up world where Michael's solo dolo, just remember, you got 3 things. You got life, you got family, and this podcast. Take it easy, everybody.